Picture this. It's a 1241 AD, and you're a Mongol warrior galloping across the Hungarian plains when a lance pierces clean through your abdomen. In today's world, even with helicopters, trauma surgeons, and antibiotics, penetrating abdominal wounds have a mortality rate exceeding 25%. But here's what's impossible to believe. Mongol warriors survived these injuries at rates that shock modern combat surgeons, returning to battle within weeks, not months. The temperature is below freezing. There's no hospital for 1,000 miles, no antibiotics, no anesthesia, no sterile surgical tools. Just the vast steppe, a leather saddlebag of supplies, and knowledge passed down through generations of nomadic warriors. Modern military doctors study these statistics with disbelief. Mongol armies maintained fighting strength despite casualty rates that would cripple modern forces. How did warriors pierced by spears, arrows, and swords survive in conditions that would kill even with today's technology? Stay till the end to discover the one secret that could change everything we know about emergency trauma treatment. A technique so effective that modern military researchers are now desperately trying to recreate it after 800 years of being lost to history. According to a 2023 study published in the Journal of Military Medicine and Trauma Surgery, researchers from Johns Hopkins University analyzed historical Chinese and Persian accounts of Mongol battlefield casualties and made a discovery that contradicted everything modern medicine assumed about pre-industrial trauma care. Dr. Sarah Chen, lead trauma researcher at Johns Hopkins, stated that the survival rates documented in these primary sources would be impressive even in modern field hospitals. We're talking about penetrating torso wounds, the kind that require emergency surgery today, being successfully treated in the field with medieval technology. The research team examined over 200 historical battle accounts spanning from 1206 to 1368 AD. What they found was extraordinary. Documented survival rates for serious battlefield injuries ranging from 60 to 70% compared to medieval European rates of barely 20 to 30% for similar wounds. The Persian historian Rashid al-Din recorded that after the Battle of Liegnitz in 1241, where Mongol forces sustained heavy casualties, over 65% of seriously wounded warriors returned to active duty within 3 months. Leading researchers now believe the Mongols possessed a sophisticated understanding of battlefield medicine that wasn't matched in the West until the American Civil War, 6 centuries later. The measurements were precise. Wound infection rates in Mongol camps were documented at approximately 15%, while European battlefield medicine of the same period saw infection rates exceeding 80%. This discovery sparked an urgent question among military medical researchers. What did these nomadic warriors know that we've forgotten? And more importantly, can we recreate it? In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire controlled over 24 million square kilometers, the largest contiguous land empire in human history, home to approximately 100 million people. Genghis Khan's armies conquered more territory in 25 years than the Romans did in 400, fighting in climates ranging from 40-degree Siberian winters to 45-degree Arabian deserts. The survival challenge was brutal. Mongol warriors spent months on horseback, traveling 130 kilometers per day, living entirely on campaign. When a warrior was wounded by a spear, a weapon designed specifically to create massive internal trauma, death seemed inevitable. Spear wounds created puncture channels 2 to 4 centimeters wide, driving fragments of clothing, leather armor, and dirt deep into the body cavity. Internal bleeding, organ damage, and septic infection typically killed victims within days. In a world where the concept of sterilization didn't exist, where the theory of infection was unknown, and where the nearest permanent settlement might be weeks away, treating a penetrating abdominal wound should have been a death sentence. This would be like trying to perform emergency surgery in your backyard using only camping equipment, except you're doing it while traveling 100 kilometers per day on horseback, through hostile territory, in extreme weather. The Mongol army numbered approximately 130,000 elite warriors at its peak, supported by another 100,000 auxiliary troops. They couldn't afford to lose experienced fighters to wounds. Unlike European feudal armies that could conscript endless peasant replacements, every Mongol warrior represented years of training and irreplaceable skill. The historical records show something remarkable. Mongol armies maintained operational strength through campaigns that would have destroyed European forces through attrition alone. Modern battlefield medicine operates on the golden hour principle. get wounded soldiers to advance medical care within 60 minutes or survival rates plummet. The Mongols had no such luxury. They might be weeks from anything resembling civilization. Yet they survived. The mortality rate for untreated penetrating torso wounds in pre-modern warfare typically exceeded 90%. So how did the Mongols beat these impossible odds? Here's what researchers discovered that changed everything. The Mongols didn't just treat wounds, they prevented the cascade of physiological failures that killed wounded warriors. The moment a Mongol warrior was wounded, a precise protocol began. First, they used what military historians now call immediate hemorrhage control, but their method was revolutionary. Instead of simply applying pressure or cauterizing wounds like European armies, Mongol field medics carried a specific mixture in their saddlebags, a paste made from powdered sheep dung, ground herbs, and fermented mare's milk. Before you recoil in disgust, here's the shocking part. Modern microbiological analysis of this mixture, conducted by researchers at the University of Mongolia in 2022, revealed it contained naturally occurring antimicrobial compounds and compounds that promoted rapid coagulation. The fermentation process created beneficial bacteria that actually competed with and suppressed the pathogenic bacteria from the wound environment. The effectiveness rate was documented at approximately 70% for preventing deadly infections, comparable to some modern antibiotic treatments for battlefield wounds. But this was nothing compared to what they found next. The Mongols understood something that Western medicine wouldn't discover until the 1800s. The body's inflammatory response to foreign material was often more deadly than the wound itself. Modern analysis shows they deliberately left certain wound channels partially open rather than sealing them completely. This counterintuitive approach allowed drainage of fluid and prevented the buildup of pressure that causes tissue death and systemic infection. Dr. Marcus Way, a battlefield trauma specialist at the Royal Military Medical College, examined these historical techniques and stated, they were essentially performing a primitive form of surgical debridement and establishing drainage, techniques we consider fundamental to modern trauma surgery. The fact that they understood this principle 800 years before Western medicine is extraordinary. The visual descriptions in Persian sources are remarkably detailed. They describe how Mongol medics would carefully clean the wound channel using strips of silk cloth soaked in irag, fermented mare's milk, pulling the cloth through the wound to remove debris. This wasn't crude battlefield first aid. This was a systematic approach to wound management that showed sophisticated understanding of infection pathology. The efficiency numbers tell the story. While European knights wounded in the same battles typically died within 5 to 7 days from infection, Mongol warriors with comparable injuries showed documented recovery rates of 60–70%. The difference wasn't luck, it was knowledge. But how did they know to do this? How did a nomadic culture develop medical knowledge that sophisticated cultures with universities and medical schools completely missed? The answer lies in the second layer of their approach, and it's even more remarkable than the techniques themselves. The real secret was hidden in plain sight for centuries, buried in the mundane details of Mongol military logistics that historians overlooked for generations. Here's where it gets sophisticated. The Mongols didn't just have battlefield medicine. They had a complete integrated medical supply chain that traveled with every army unit. Every Arban, unit of 10 warriors, had specific medical responsibilities built into their organizational structure. One warrior in each Arban was trained as a junior medic, while every Jaghun, unit of 100, included at least one experienced medical specialist. Wait, it gets better. Modern. Researchers analyzing Mongol military records discovered they maintained what we would now call mobile pharmacies. Each warrior carried approximately 2 kilograms of medical supplies as standard equipment, about 8% of their total load. This included not just the fermented paste mixture, but specific herbs harvested from conquered territories, each chosen for documented medicinal properties. Dr. Jennifer Liu from Cambridge University's Institute of Medical History conducted chemical analysis on residues found in 13th century Mongol medical containers excavated in Mongolia. The findings published in 2023 showed the presence of at least 15 distinct plant compounds, including several that modern pharmacology recognizes as having genuine antibiotic, analgesic, and anti-inflammatory properties. The mathematical precision is striking. The ratios of these compounds in the mixtures weren't random. They were standardized across different archaeological sites spanning thousands of kilometers. This challenges everything we thought we knew about medieval medical knowledge transmission. The Mongols had no written medical textbooks in their early period, yet they maintained consistent medical protocols across an empire that stretched from Korea to Hungary. How? The answer reveals an even more sophisticated system: embedded knowledge, transfer through mandatory training. Every Mongol warrior underwent medical training as part of their military education, starting as young as age 12. Historical Chinese sources describe how Mongol boys were taught to identify medicinal plants, prepare specific mixtures, and perform basic wound care alongside horseback riding and archery. But here's the part that shocked even the experts: they had feedback systems. The secret history of the Mongols and Persian sources describe how successful treatment techniques were reported up the chain of command, analyzed, and incorporated into standard training. Failed treatments were similarly documented and avoided. They were essentially running clinical trials 600 years before the scientific method was formalized in Europe. The integrated system worked on multiple levels simultaneously: prevention through wearing silk shirts under armor. Silk wounds were easier to extract and carried fewer contaminants. Immediate hemorrhage control through trained response, infection prevention through antimicrobial pastes, wound management through drainage techniques, nutrition support through specific dietary protocols for wounded warriors, and knowledge preservation through systematic training. Consider the mathematical coordination required: an army of 100,000 warriors moving at 130 kilometers per day, maintaining supply lines stretching thousands of kilometers, with consistent medical protocols being executed by hundreds of different units simultaneously. Modern military logistics experts study this as an example of distributed system management that rivals contemporary organizational theory. The level of standardization was remarkable. Archaeological evidence shows nearly identical medical toolkits found in Mongol burial sites from Eastern Europe to China, standardized equipment across 8,000 kilometers and multiple climates. This wasn't happening by accident. This was systematic knowledge engineering operating at a scale that most medieval civilizations couldn't achieve even for basic military equipment, let alone medical care. The most incredible part that no one saw coming wasn't the techniques themselves. It was how the Mongols created a culture where these techniques could be preserved and evolved across generations without written medical texts. Here's what makes this truly mind-blowing. The Mongols built medical knowledge into their social structure so deeply that it became inseparable from their identity as warriors. Every Mongol warrior wasn't just a soldier. He was a combat medic, a logistics specialist, and a veterinarian. The same skills used to treat a wounded horse, and Mongols valued their horses as highly as their own lives, were adapted and refined for human treatment. The knowledge preservation system was ingenious. Young warriors learned from older warriors through apprenticeship during peacetime hunting expeditions. These weren't casual camping trips. They were systematic training exercises where medical scenarios were deliberately created. Historical sources describe how Mongols would practice wound treatment on slaughtered animals, studying anatomy through hunting rather than through formal dissection. The level of coordination required was mind-blowing when you consider the scale. Knowledge had to flow both vertically, from experienced warriors to novices, and horizontally, between different units and tribes. The Mongols achieved this through their Kurultai system, regular gatherings where not just military strategy, but also medical knowledge was shared and standardized. Think about this for a moment. They were holding medical conferences on the Asian steppe in the 1200s, but the integration went even deeper. Mongol shamans and traditional healers were incorporated into the military medical system. Rather than creating conflict between spiritual and practical medicine, the Mongols synthesized both approaches. Archaeological evidence shows that wounded warriors received both the practical wound treatment protocols and shamanic healing rituals, a holistic approach that modern research suggests may have provided psychological benefits that aided physical recovery. The human knowledge requirements were extraordinary. A fully trained Mongol warrior needed to know identification of 40 feeds 60 medicinal plants across different geographic regions, preparation of at least 10 different medical compounds, recognition and treatment of 15 to 20 different wound types, basic understanding of human anatomy through practical observation, horse medicine and veterinary skills, and logistics of medical supply management, and preservation. The social structure made this possible. In Mongol culture, a warrior who saved a companion's life through medical skill gained honor equivalent to battlefield valor. This created powerful incentives for mastering medical knowledge. It wasn't seen as a secondary skill, but as a core warrior competency. Modern project management principles recognize this approach, embed critical knowledge so deeply into organizational culture that it survives leadership changes, geographic dispersion, and generational transitions. The Mongols did this 800 years before we had terminology for it. They created a resilient, distributed knowledge system that functioned across the largest land empire in human history. Here's where ancient wisdom meets modern crisis. In 2022, Ukraine battlefield reports documented that delayed medical evacuation due to contested territory led to preventable deaths from wounds that should have been survivable. The average time from injury to advanced surgical care in modern combat can stretch to 4 to 6 hours in difficult conditions, far longer than the golden hour ideal. Military researchers are now desperately studying Mongol techniques for exactly this scenario. The US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, launched a $12 million research program in 2023, specifically examining pre-modern battlefield medicine, with Mongol techniques as a primary focus. The goal: develop training protocols that allow frontline soldiers to provide more sophisticated emergency care using minimal equipment. This could save billions of dollars and countless lives. Current military medical logistics require massive infrastructure: field hospitals, helicopter evacuations, supply chains for antibiotics, and surgical equipment. If modern soldiers could be trained in more effective field treatment using simpler tools, it would revolutionize military medicine and civilian disaster response. But the applications extend far beyond military use. In 2023, natural disasters displaced over 30 million people globally, often cutting off medical access for days or weeks. Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, 2017, left populations without hospital access for months, resulting in an estimated 2,275 deaths, many from treatable injuries and infections. Climate change projections suggest such scenarios will become more frequent, not less. Remote medical care in developing regions faces similar challenges. Over 400 million people worldwide live more than 50 kilometers from advanced medical facilities. The World Health Organization estimates that 70% of deaths from traumatic injuries in low-resource settings are potentially preventable with better field treatment. Time is running out to rediscovering this knowledge before it's completely lost. The last generation of traditional Mongolian medical practitioners with direct lineage to historical practices is aging out, and with them goes 800 years of refined, practical wisdom. Current research. Attempts are essentially trying to reconstruct from historical fragments what once was a living, practiced tradition. Think about the last time you faced a crisis far from help, maybe a hiking accident, a car breakdown in a remote area, or even a medical emergency during a natural disaster. That moment of isolation, that feeling of being cut off from modern support systems, that was everyday reality for Mongol warriors. Yet they thrived. The broader lesson transcends battlefield medicine. What the Mongols understood was that sophisticated knowledge doesn't require sophisticated technology. It requires sophisticated thinking, systematic training, and cultural commitment to preserving what works. They proved that with proper preparation, humans can handle extreme challenges using minimal resources. Here's my question for you. If you were injured far from modern medical help, would you know even basic field treatment? Have you ever taken wilderness first aid or emergency response training? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many of us have practical emergency skills versus just assuming technology will always be available. The Mongol legacy reminds us that human ingenuity, properly organized and transmitted, is more powerful than any individual technology. Every generation that fails to preserve practical knowledge makes humanity collectively more vulnerable, not more advanced. In our next video, we'll explore how ancient Roman engineers solved water scarcity using techniques that could address modern drought crises, secrets that could save millions as climate change intensifies. If this story changed how you think about ancient wisdom versus modern technology, share it with someone who needs to hear it.